Missed an episode of your favorite podcast? Choose from over a decade of content in our archives, not just the latest episode. All free at gcnlive.com.
This is your call to action. Get prepared, America. Economy, survival, energy, disasters. This is USAPrepares.com. Informative radio, educational radio. Interact now by emailing instructor@USAPrepares.com or text at 434-390-7953. Class, please take your seats. Now, your instructor, Vincent Finelli.
I'm all excited today, class. I really am. I'm going to say a few words that you haven't heard me say in a little while. Welcome, Captain John Regan.
So how does this work again?
Yeah, it's work again. Captain John Regan, it's great to hear your voice. It really is. I've missed chatting with you on the air, and we've been able to chat off the air, but it's great to hear your voice. So how have you been?
It's been an adventure, and that's a lot of what we'll be talking about today. I do have a post up at the financialstateoftheunion.com in the news tab, and it says, "Got iron. USA Prepares January 2nd.
Mm-hmm. So, class, if you want to follow along with us, just go to the Financial State of the Union.com and click on the news tab, and you'll see Got Iron, USA Prepares January 2nd. And it starts out with, our modern American diet contains a level of iron and sugar never before known in human history. John, you want to tell us about that?
Oh, boy, does that get into areas. We had talked before how sugar consumption in America is just off the charts, in the neighborhood of 150 pounds of sugar per year. And you look at where it was a century ago, before industrialization especially, you would have a consumption of, say, 2 or 3 pounds of sugar a year. We are now consuming 2 to 3 pounds of sugar a week, and our bodies just were never designed to have that amount of processed sugar dumped into it. We also have the pleasure or unfortunate coincidence with industrialization of having a pretty steady food supply at a low cost, allowing us to eat things, especially in America, red meat that contains iron, and we have more of that than we had in history. You just couldn't afford to live that way unless you were very wealthy. And both of these issues turn into problems in our body. When it comes to the sugar side of things, when you consume a lot of carbohydrates, your body has to pump out a bunch of insulin to try to take care of that sugar. And in that process, it keeps on pumping and pumping and pumping because we keep on, slurping and slurping and slurping. You look at, when you and I were young, the normal Coke bottle was 6.5 ounces, and we'd just occasionally have one of those. Now you go get these, big, humongous 44-ounce drinks. So you're drinking a 6-pack at a time compared to what we used to do, and sometimes you even go back for refills. And it actually turns out that, it's as bad as the sugar, which today is actually high fructose corn syrup, which is even worse than the granulated sugar that used to go in these drinks. Even the diet drinks are bad. They've found out that these diet drinks will cause diabetes much in the same way that the sugar drinks will, in addition to the problems that the chemicals used to make those drinks sweet cause other issues. We are at a point now where most Americans, and when I say most, I'm talking about 80%. So if you're around the table, there's 5 of you. On average, 4 of those 5 are going to have insulin resistance. And that's because your body's been producing insulin so long without rest that it's, I guess a way of putting it, when you walk into a room and there's an odor there, and after you're in the room for a few minutes, you don't notice it anymore. And, your senses become numb to it. Well, that's kind of what happens with insulin. You have all this insulin, and your cells kind of become numb to the signal, become resistant, and that means that even more insulin is required to work, and it just starts cascading from there. So not only are you having too much sugar, you're having too much insulin. This causes inflammation, which causes a bunch of other problems. And I think a lot of us have heard, all the commercials about diabetes and all of that. But I think part of human nature to begin with is we believe that, first off, that won't happen to me. That happens to everybody else. And then we either don't notice or don't have symptoms because these things build up over a number of years, and then sometimes by the time you get the symptom, you've already got damage, and in some cases, the first symptom you get is death, either by heart attack or stroke. So it's kind of important that we at least pay a little bit of attention to this. The other side of the equation that I was talking about was iron, which prompted the title, God Iron, because this one is practically unknown. I accidentally found out about it because I got Dr. Mercola's latest book, Fat from Fuel, and in there he recommended knowing what your iron levels are, because if you have too much iron, that damages your mitochondria, which is basically what makes your cells work right. And in addition, too much iron starts damaging your organs. So one of those is the pancreas, and which can help feed the problem of diabetes, which kind of goes hand in hand with the diet, kind of just doubles up there on the pancreas. Too much iron can damage the liver as well. It can induce fatty liver. It can also induce liver cancer. It can go into other parts. In fact, I've got a nice big long list in the middle, symptoms of hemochromatosis. And the top 2 are pain and fatigue. And fatigue and weight loss were a couple of the items that I was dealing with. But there's much more beyond that. We've already covered the organ damage, liver cirrhosis, liver cancer, insulin resistance and diabetes, bronze diabetes, where your skin actually turns color, hypogonadism, low libido, arthritis, restlessness, difficulty concentrating or focusing, increased sensitivity to heat or cold, sweating, shallow breathing or shortness of breath, frequent colds or infections, inability to relax muscles, having back pain, headache, dizziness, skin conditions including rash and itching, digestive disturbances and weight loss, depression, the inability to relax in general, desire for solitude, irritability and anger, changeable moods. And when you look at that list, of course, there's other things that can cause these symptoms. And that's one of the reasons why doctors don't even look at iron. They'll treat you for a lot of these other conditions and never, ever bother to do a blood test to see if you have an issue. And as it turns out, there's a hereditary component of this. And while anybody can have hemochromatosis, which is too much iron, for Caucasians in general, 1 in 9, or nearly 10%, that would be over 10%, 11%, have the genes for hemochromatosis. There's actually a couple of genes. One is better than the other. The other, you can end up with extremely high levels of iron. And if you're fortunate enough to have ancestry from far northwest Europe, England, Scotland, Ireland, and of course, I've talked about before how my Regan ancestors got a free trip to the Americas by hunting on the King's Land on a Sabbath there in Ireland. And if you have that ancestry, you have a 25% chance of having these genes. And unlike the insulin resistance problem, where you can make lifestyle changes, proper diet and exercise, and have a big effect, with hemochromatosis, you can't do that. The only real way of getting rid of the excess iron is by getting rid of some of the blood. And this is where, my service to my country got me just one more time. Those 3 years I spent in Germany back in the 80s during the mad cow scare, I am permanently banned from donating blood. So that is another side of this we'll talk about coming up.
Captain John Regan's with us, and I find it fascinating that your relatives who have now passed got a free ride over here for committing a crime. Captain John Regan, you were telling us about, you were stationed in Germany for 3 years. There was a mad cow scare back in the 1980s, I remember that. And as a result, you are prohibited from donating blood, and getting blood out of your system is the solution to excess iron. Is that correct?
That's correct. And I'm still working on that problem. And I say, only half joking, that if I can't get a prescription to get the blood taken, then I can order a package of 10 collection bags off the internet. And I figure if a junkie can figure out how to get a needle in a vein, so can I. Just instead of putting something in, I'd be taking something out. Hopefully it won't get to that point, but I have an appointment coming up, and I'll talk about my fun in that area. But I guess I should back up and say how I ended up going down this path. And if you remember, about a year and a half ago, I was a last-minute addition to the Hear the Watchman conference in Knoxville. And that was so fortunate for me. I went there and spoke, and then I was invited again to speak in Dallas about 9 months ago. So I go in and check in with the organizer before the conference. And first thing she says to me, "Have you lost weight?" And I was kind of shocked at that, because I actually thought I'd gained weight, because in doing all my normal prep work for being on the radio weekly, I was also doing the preparation to speak at the conference, and I was just eating all kinds of bad stuff because I didn't have time to do things right. And In fact, that weight loss has continued. Right now, I don't know exactly how much is unexpected and how much is because of our change in diet. You might not recognize Becky and me now. We're both around hovering around the 320-pound spot. From the point I left Springfield there, I've lost about 65 pounds. And like I say, most of that was without effort, which is not the way things normally are. I mean, back in junior high, I'd gotten up a little over 200 and, belonged to Weight Watchers, so I know how hard it is to lose weight. So that effortless weight loss, boy, if I could find a way of packaging that, I'd be a multimillionaire by now. So in the looking up the symptoms, because I was also suffering from fatigue, which could have been exhaustion given the schedule I was doing. But when you have fatigue and unexplained weight loss, there's a number of things that can cause that. And I put this into a symptom checker, and most of the items on the list were one type of cancer or another. It's kind of interesting that both of those are symptoms of hemochromatosis. But unless you only put fatigue in there, chronic fatigue, the hemochromatosis possibility doesn't even appear in the symptom or in the possibility list. And we proceeded on. We had blood taken for the CA-125 test. And that test is primarily for female-type cancers, but it does have a reaction to some others. But both of our tests came back in ranges that suggest whatever cancers that test checks for, that's not a problem for us. So that set me on a journey. Okay, what is causing the problem? And we'll get back to that journey on the other side of the break.
Captain John Regan is sharing his experiences with solving his health problems. Plus, I hope you're paying attention very carefully to what he's saying, because you may need to figure things out for yourself, about yourself. Got iron? Captain John Regan's telling us a story about his pursuit of health and his journey. Captain John Regan, please continue.
And since we live in a free country, at this point I probably ought to say I'm not a doctor, nor do I play one on TV. What I'm doing today is for your educational benefit. I'm covering a lot of ground that took me many hours of research to get to, but only a licensed professional can give you a diagnosis. And as you will learn, finding a medical professional that will actually work to solve the problem rather than just treating the symptoms is a problem no matter what your condition is. And that's just the state of the healthcare. I know Dr. Shealy's talked about that a lot as well. And let me just make one more side trip. I discovered when we were doing our taxes this year that we indeed were too broke to buy Obamacare insurance, and that there is a form you can file, and if your income is at a certain level as compared to what the premiums are for your area, there's a form that you can file at tax time to excuse the penalty for not having insurance. And I actually end up going back and filing amended returns for the prior 2 years. And even though we have been using tax software, all it would do is ask, do you have insurance or not? It never went through an interview asking the questions that you need to go through to determine whether you file this additional form or not. And you actually have to start that interview manually. And very frustrating. But, Becky does have health insurance through where she works. However, like most people, or a lot of people, it's by the time you pay for the health insurance, you can't afford to pay for the co-pays and deductibles to get treatment. And we couldn't afford to get me health insurance because that would pretty much take the rest for a check. And about all we could cut out to cover that would be our rent. And, living in our cars just didn't seem attractive to us. So I'm here having to figure out a lot of the stuff on my own. And anything that I put towards determining what the cause is that much that I don't have to treat the problem. And I already knew that changing the diet is going to be a big component of that. So, and unfortunately, the good foods cost more, and the bad foods are more expensive than they used to be. I know everybody is feeling those budget issues. So we get through the CA 125 test, and now I'm at a point I don't know what the issue is. I don't even know what direction to go in. But fortunately, Dr. Mercola came out with a new book this year. He's come out with diet books before, and this is the latest adjustment to what he's learned through the years, and he's called this book Fat for Fuel. And it used to be, before we got into our modern society, all of your food before industrialization was natural. It wasn't highly processed stuff, added chemicals, pesticides, and all the stuff that we get to enjoy today. Well, with all those additional toxins, it set us up to where, especially with our American diet, that most of the time we are burning carbs for fuel for our body, which glucose is the primary source of energy. That's what our brain uses. When you ingest too many carbohydrates, and I learned this from an obesity doctor over 20 years ago, first off, your body has the immediate amount of sugar in your blood that your body uses for fuel, including your brain. The excess gets stored in the muscles, and your muscles can only store a certain amount of that. Then the excess gets stored as fat. Well, the thing is when you use that fat, and that gets to be an issue too, that fat cannot be converted back to sugar. However, it can be converted to fuel for your muscles. But if you have insulin going on all the time, your body can't create the hormone that's required to burn fat in order to feed or fuel your muscles from the fat. And in the olden days, first off, you probably didn't get that many carbs. And you could go back and forth from carbs to having the fat, which, fat's a great source of calories. And, if you think about how societies were, most of the cities were along the coastlines. You ate a lot of fish, which has omega-3s, and all of that's good for you. Well, the other component of food is protein. Well, again, your body needs a certain amount of protein because that's the building blocks of your body. However, we eat too much protein. And especially when you do that from animal sources, you now have more bad things that happen to your body. But it was just in these last few months that I learned that when you have too much protein, you can actually elevate your blood sugar for that. which again adds to the insulin resistance. So here you are, too many carbs all the time, too much protein, and you're just fueling this insulin problem. And I've had, some people, including healthcare professionals, say that fat causes blood sugar problems. Well, let me tell you what I found on that. First, I found one study that is pushed by a radical vegan, and it's true, plants are wonderful, we don't eat enough of them, but to go totally plant-based, you're going to miss out on, especially B12. It's hard to get omega-3s that your body can use, especially as you get older. So veganism is not really the greatest thing. And the study was based on processed red meat. So you've got this meat that's not the greatest for you to begin with all the additives that aren't good for you either. And that was used as the reason why the fat gives you an increase in blood sugar. The other study I found, and I don't know if I wanted to laugh or cry, it gave an example of someone that's insulin dependent, eats a meal of fettuccine Alfredo, which is pasta, which a diabetic shouldn't be eating anyway, combined with a lot of fat. So you would inject yourself with insulin to take care of the carbs from the meal. Well, the problem is that the fat would slow down the absorption of the carbohydrates. So the insulin ended up being used up by the time the carbs hit the system. So it really wasn't the fat causing the sugar problem. The fat was just slowing down the absorption of the carbs, which caused bad timing between the carbs and putting the insulin in. So if you come across those people that want to tell you that fat causes you sugar problems, that is not the case from what I can find. It's another one of those, how to lie with studies. Anyway, I was in Dr. McCullough's book, and he talked about one of the problems that is not diagnosed very well, and that is excess iron. Because we are conditioned, and how often have we heard, that we've got these remedies for iron-poor tired blood and things like that? Well, turns out more people have too much iron than too little iron. And when you have too much iron, we went through the list of all the bad things, and that's not even all of them, that happen to your body. There's, fortunately, ways that we can check for both of these conditions. There's a lot of tests that can be done. The two I like, you have the hemoglobin A1C test, which basically gives an average of what your blood sugar was for the last 2 or 3 months. Nice thing about this test is you don't have to do fasting, and this test, even in mainstream medicine, the results are fairly accepted. What percent you're good, what percent you're pre-diabetic, and then above what percent you're in a diabetic condition. And we'll continue on with the testing when we come back.
Yeah, class, if you want to go to the website and follow along, thefinancialstateoftheunion.com. thefinancialstateoftheunion.com. It's Captain John Regan. Captain John Regan's with us, and he's telling us about his journey. And last, he spoke about his hemoglobin A1C test. No fasting. John, please continue.
Well, back the second week of October, we ended up having 4 tests done on each of us. The hemoglobin A1C, the serum ferritin, the C-reactive protein, and we also did the hepatitis C for a couple of reasons. One, that there's a lot of people in our age group that have Hep C that don't know it. The symptoms could be caused by that. We didn't think so. And Becky has a sister that had contracted Hep C before Becky and I even met, so it's a long time ago, and she doesn't know how she contracted it. She believes it was from when she was spending time with her husband in Europe. Her husband was in the Army back then, and so she was treated in Army facilities in Europe, and possibly some equipment didn't get properly cleaned. Who knows? Anyway, she's had to deal with that for about 3 decades now. Well, the test came back. Neither of us have a hepatitis C issue. For the inflammation, the C-reactive protein, mine's in the normal range. It could be a little better. Becky's is in the high range, and we're working on taking care of that as well. But what was interesting, and talked about on air, how we both had similar symptoms. In my case, it was worse than what Becky's experiencing, and we really saw that on the iron side, the serum ferritin test. My iron was 389, and the point at which you are considered to have hemochromatosis is 300 for a man. For a woman, the point is 200, and Becky came in at 201. So we both have iron issues, and we both have, sugar issues, insulin resistance, all of that. Our A1C, mine came in at 12.6. Becky's came in almost a point higher. To translate that into glucose numbers, which people are more familiar with, mine was 12.8, which would be around 320, and Becky's would be in the 340s. To look at where you get diagnosed, you'd like to see blood sugar less than 100, which is an A1C of 5.0 or less, up to 5.6, which would be 114 on the glucose. You're okay. 5.7 to 6.4, which starts getting in the 120s and 130s. You're considered pre-diabetic, and at 6.5 and above, which would be 140 glucose, you're considered diabetic. So both of us were in very bad condition for blood sugar. The good news is a lot of that can be changed. We haven't actually started the exercise part, but we did change our diet, which we'll get into next hour. 7 weeks later, I had a second A1C test, and my number had dropped from 12.8 to 10.8. And about 7 weeks after that, I had a third test, and it was down to 8.8. So a lot of progress in that area. Not so much on the iron side. And we'll get into that next hour.
Captain John Regan, have you ever heard me so quiet?
No, I haven't.
Yeah. I'm listening intently. We'll be right back, right after top of the hour news and commercial announcements, and John will get into how he's resolving these issues, and he'll be talking about his diet and what's working and what he intends to do. We'll be right back. Everyone all set? Got iron? Second hour with Captain John Regan. He's explaining his journey about finding out what he needed to do to solve many of the symptoms that he was experiencing. Pain and fatigue, and the list goes on and on. And he was able to determine that there's too much iron in his blood. John, if I'm not mistaken, George Washington was a believer in bloodletting, and that replenishing the blood was a good thing. So
and
you're on the journey.
Yeah. When I was younger and before I was banned from giving blood, I was a fairly regular blood donor. And when I gave blood, I always thought I felt better. And I thought that was just psychological. I'm doing something good for somebody. But it's quite possible that there's actually a physiological reason I felt better from donating blood.
Yeah, I felt the same way. I agree with that. Yeah, your journey is absolutely fascinating. So please continue.
Well, fortunately, in most states, you can get these tests without having to go to your doctor. So if you have insurance, you can skip that copay and the time that you have to take out of your schedule to get it. Your insurance may or may not cover the test. If you skip your doctor, you'd have to find out that on your own. However, if you don't have insurance like me, you're going to be paying out of pocket anyway. And I found a site, in fact, there are several places on the Internet that you can order these tests through. The one that I've got the link here, and this link is just above the symptoms of hemochromatosis headline, and it says, check out this month's offers at Walk-In Lab. And if you do click through on that link, I do make a small commission. I have to tell you that to make the FTC happy. But the Walk-In Lab site, I found prices that were often half of what other sites charged. And I checked the prices yesterday. Both the serum ferritin and the hemoglobin A1C tests are $28 each. So for $56, you can get both of those tests. And in fact, if you go in there today before midnight Pacific time, they're having a 20% off sale. It's right on their main page. They've got a coupon code Fireworks, and you just enter that in the checkout. And so instead of 56, you'd get 20% off. So that's more than $10 off. So, and you don't necessarily have to go get the test done right away. In fact, if you wanted to, like in the case of the A1C, where you might need to test it over time. Of course, if you don't have your initial test, you don't have a problem. You could buy some of these ahead of time, or next time they have a sale, you can buy some of these ahead of time because you have 6 months to actually go use the test. When I first started using Walk-In Lab, the only choice was LabCorp. They've since added Quest, and when I looked yesterday, they actually have some tests that you can do at home. So it's quite impressive. It's very easy to use their website. They've got the links there where you can make an appointment with the lab. That's typically an optional step. It just makes it easier. If you don't mind waiting, because sometimes these lab places get backed up. But if you have an appointment, you usually get in pretty darn close to your appointment time, so you can be in and out, and then you'll get an email saying when the test is ready. You go back into the Walk-In Lab website, and there's the test. With the A1C test, go ahead.
I was just going to say, John, that Dr. Norman Shealy has ordered some blood tests for me and Mrs. Finelli, and it's a really simple process, very, very quick, exactly what you're saying. And the guys and gals who have drawn my blood are really expert at this. And I've actually heard a medical doctor say, you know what, I'm having a lot of trouble finding this vein. It's really difficult. Why don't you go to the lab, because they do, hundreds of these a day. And it's true. It's true. So, but John, many who are listening to us may think that, how's this possible? How can you have a blood test without a prescription? Well, you can. You absolutely can. And I have. So, and you have. So if you want to see what we're talking about, you can go to thefinancialstateoftheunion.com. thefinancialstateoftheunion.com, click on the news tab, and for today's broadcast, you'll see a link. And the link says, check out this month's offer at Walk-In Lab. And that's the one that you get a small commission if they click on that, right?
That's right.
Okay. There you go. Please continue, John.
So with the A1C test, it's going to give you your percent, and it's going to give you all the ranges so you know where you stand. That's pretty standard. And, so long as you're not in a diabetic state, you're probably in pretty good shape just to make adjustments to your lifestyle, and that means changing what you eat and adding some exercise if you're not doing so. Now, the diet part is going to be a longer discussion. We've talked about before, I've got back problem, Becky's got knee problems, so doing the nice exercises, going out and walking, doesn't work for us. What I did manage to do was get a vibrating platform, and if you go this route, you need to make sure you have one that has two motors, which causes the platform to go two directions at the same time, which causes the muscles to work more. And you can find out more about how to use these from Dr. McCullough's website. It causes the muscles to contract very rapidly. So you start out with just 30 seconds on a low level and work up to 10 minutes on a higher level. And I can at least stand for that long, and that's our next step in adding the exercise part. The diet part, we're using a ketogenic diet, and there's tons of different types of those out there, and I'm going to get more specific on those. The flip side is when you have the iron. When you get the serum ferritin test, again, for a woman, if you are over 200, a man over 300, that's what's considered hemochromatosis. However, on the lab test you get, their reference range is probably going to go up to 400, and when you talk to a doctor about it, they're just going to say that you're in the normal range. So I've got a link down in that, some informative iron links. There's near the bottom NIH document, National Institutes of Health, and this talks about the gene-related hereditary hemochromatosis, and in the diagnosis testing section of this webpage, that's where you can show a doctor from an NIH.gov website link that was based on two things, a transferrin iron saturation, and if you want to do that test, fine, but if you don't have the serum or just doing the serum ferritin is going to give you an idea if you have a problem, and if you want to do the other one after that, fine. But that's where it says greater than 200 for females, greater than 300 for males. And, hopefully that will then get you to where you can start having a discussion with the doctor. For the most part, the choice is getting rid of iron. And I used to think it was most people. I found out this past week, only 38% of Americans are eligible to donate blood. So that means nearly two-thirds of the people out there, if you have an excess iron condition, you're not going to be able to go that route. Now, if you can donate blood, so long as your levels aren't too high, just going and donating would probably be good enough. You lose about 30 points for each donation, and it's 56 days between donations minimum. And that's what Becky's doing, because she can still donate blood. I would, like I say, I'm nearly 400 points. There are people that have iron counts in the thousands. And if you're at that level, they have to get very aggressive, where you have to have blood taken once or twice a week, sometimes for over a year. And there are some people that can't even do the blood draws. And in that case, there are 3 drugs I've read about for chelation of iron. 2 are oral, 1's IV, and all of those have really bad side effects. It's kind of like the last thing you want to do, but if you have those high levels of iron, that may be the only medical possibility you have. On the more natural side, some people have had luck with turmeric or curcumin as an iron chelator. We've been taking curcumin for several years, and if it does work as a chelator for us, then I'd hate to see what our levels would have been, but I don't think that's working. I'll talk about the other chelator when we get back.
Class, I hope you can share this broadcast with friends and family. I've never heard it anywhere else. Captain John Regan. And we've been talking about iron chelation and the ketogenic diet. John, please continue.
Well, I just came across another possible iron chelator, and that's the bottom of the iron links. Iron chelation goes to an article, The Overlooked Cancer Cure from Japan. And it talks about, and what you would search on if you're interested in this, is IP6. It's a rice bran extract, and I am going to order this and try some myself and see if it does any good between now and trying to get some blood taken. Hopefully, with some of what I've found, I'll be able to get a prescription. In fact, above the iron chelation link, there's a video, Why You Must Test Ferritin Levels. This is a really nice interview, and one of the doctors being interviewed is, let me get his name up again. I had that earlier. Dr. Leo Zakarski. This guy has a double specialty of hematology and oncology. One of the hospitals he works at is the VA Medical Center in Vermont, which I'm hoping that'll come in handy when I go back to the VA, which is another story. And he's also a professor at Dartmouth. So then he earned his MD in 1962, so he's been around a while. And one of the things he talks about in this interview is he did the study with over 8,000 people, so pretty decent study. And he started finding out, what levels of iron are healthy, at what point do you start seeing problems. And what he found is if the iron level was less than 80, that these associated problems weren't existent. Between 80 and 100 is like the transition phase. And when you have over 100, that's when bad things started appearing. Now, on the flip side, if you have iron less than 20, that's too low, and you need to get your iron increased. In Dr. McCullough's book, the sweet spot that he gives is between 30 and 50, not wanting it over 60 or less than 20. But it looks like anything less than 80 would probably be good enough for managing your health. And if you can't do it by blood donation, you can try the IP6, or you can try the curcumin or the turmeric as options. It's also interesting, flipping back over to the sugar side of things. I don't know if you saw this from about a month and a half ago. The sugar industry had a study 50 years ago that they stopped, and this is the link under sugar, the 50-year-old hidden study. They found out during the study that sugar directly increases the risk of heart disease and cancer. And they knew this in 1968. I imagine this news will really hit the mainstream once the lawsuits start flying. But we've, I know Dr. Shealy's talked about it. We've talked about it. Sugar, especially too much sugar, is not good for you. Dr. Shealy says no sugar at all. I think if you go back to the pre-industrial, not more than 2 or 3 pounds a year, you'd probably be fine. But the 150 pounds a year, no, you can't go back to that and expect drugs to fix things for you.
Yeah, Dr. Shealy says sugar is not a food.
And it's not. Back before that, it took a lot of effort to turn sugarcane into sugar. So you primarily had like honey or maple syrup, and you didn't have those things in high quantity.
John Regan, you're absolutely right. When I was growing up, sweet things, that was a real treat. It was a treat. Now so many people have them every day, like staples. We'll be right back. Plus, I just got off the phone with Marjorie Wildcraft, the Grow Network. She's going to be on with us 9 a.m. Friday. So if you want to tune in, she'll be with us. Captain John Regan, we've been talking about iron chelation, turmeric, curcumin, and IP6, and the iron ranges that you found that are healthy and unhealthy. Please continue.
And boy, has it been an adventure.
Yeah.
Among the things I learned, you can be thin and still have insulin resistance. You can be anemic and still have too much iron. So the only way that you can tell for sure if you have a problem or not is to do these blood tests. And for me, like I say, the regular price, $28 each, $56 for both of them. If you don't have a problem, I think that's pretty cheap for peace of mind. And if you do have a problem, you can start taking care of it. The younger you are when you find out, the better off you are. If both parents have high iron readings, and you may want to get the DNA test done to see if you have the hereditary component. The least expensive I've found on that is $200. I broke down and gave my DNA to 23andMe a few weeks ago. I'm still waiting on the results, but they had a sale on. I'm using them to see if I've got the hereditary version, which I'm pretty sure I do. This would just confirm it for me. With the knowledge on the blood sugar side, if you're not in the diabetic condition, the changes are pretty easy. On the iron side, if you can donate blood and your levels aren't too high, that's pretty easy. If they're higher, then the problem is you have to get a prescription to get blood drawn, and that may or may not cost money depending on the policies of the local blood bank. And if you have a diagnosis of hereditary hemochromatosis, sometimes then the blood bank will not charge to take your blood. So there's a variety of factors in there. But either way, even if you don't have these conditions, it doesn't hurt to eat healthy. And what direction we've gone is a version of the ketogenic diet. And I did not put a link on here, but Dr. Berg, that's B-E-R-G, has a YouTube channel, and he puts out short videos, typically in the 2 to 5 minute range, that are very focused and bite-sized, and you can actually search on different things within his area and find out a pretty good opinion. He's not a medical doctor; he's a chiropractor, so he can't give necessarily the medical diagnosis, but he's got the background to understand the medical literature, and he can do a good job of educating. There's another channel out there by another chiropractor, Dr. Bergman, Bergman. He has longer videos on the order of around an hour or so, and he'll get in deeper and start making connections and things along that line. I like both of the channels myself. What Dr. Berg has is very similar to what Dr. McCullough has in his Fat for Fuel book. You've got the three macronutrients, carbohydrates, protein, and fat. Obviously, if you have a sugar problem, you want to limit carbohydrates. And some versions of these are very low carb, and that's not necessarily good for you either. And what Dr. Berg recommends is 7 to 10 cups of vegetables a day. And that is a lot of vegetables, not necessarily salad, although that's a component too. And that's actually where you get a lot of your potassium from, by the way. But because these vegetables have fiber, the fiber grams don't count. So you look at the net carbs, the total carbohydrates minus the fiber, and then you try to keep your total carbs as close to 20 as you can, possibly up to 50, while you're trying to correct this problem. Once your body becomes insulin sensitive again, then you have more freedom. You can do a little bit more, but you just can't go back to this idiotic sugar-based, carbohydrate-based diet. For the protein part, Dr. McCullough has a formula in his book where you take your lean body mass, and we happen to have a scale that measures percent body fat. So I took those pounds off and to come up with the lean body mass, and you can do the approximations in other ways. Then you divide by 2.2 to convert that into kilograms, and that number is the number of grams of protein that you need per day. So for me, that was about 49 grams of protein. For Becky, it was about 45. And that gives your body enough protein to replace your body, your muscles, your organs, everything that the protein building blocks go to generate. And then everything else is made up with fat. You want to use good fat, so we're talking about things like the omega-3s. Olive oil's good, coconut oil's good. And along those lines, we've talked about how there's a lot of fake extra virgin olive oil out there. And one of the decent brands I found is at Aldi, and we happen to have one of those close to us. And this is for $3.99 for one bottle extra virgin olive oil, and it's really extra virgin olive oil. So I have converted over to using that. Aldi also has a pound package of organic mixed green veggies, salad-wise, and that's for under $3. So some of this doesn't have to break the bank. I create an Italian dressing we've talked about before, even posted the recipe, combining the olive oil and apple cider vinegar with some spices to have a nice Italian dressing. I'd like to add some feta cheese, which doesn't have carbs. And I've gotten to where to throw some meat in for protein. Aldi also has sardines. We'll use the ones in spring water. It's 3.5 ounces of protein. I just, crush them up into pieces, and I hardly even notice there's fish in my salad. But that's good for protein, good for omega-3s. And I'll also put some other veggies in there. And it ends up being where, like, every bite of the salad is a different taste because it's grabbing different parts of what I put in there. When I first started this, I thought, gee, I'm going to get awfully tired of salad. And after about the first week, it's getting more and more to where I'm craving salad. And one of the surprises that we had changing our diet is neither one of us had cravings for carbs. So we, it's not hard passing up the sweets. Sometimes it's kind of hard passing up, if you're smelling that freshly baked bread that's just awfully enticing. But there are a lot of keto recipes out there where you don't have to totally give up things. Over this weekend, we were able to try some out. One was a recipe for pancakes, which were pretty good. And we also had a recipe to make maple syrup using a maple flavoring and a fiber-based syrup that has very few net carbs. And, it's not quite the same, but it's pretty close, very nice for making pancakes and syrup. And we also made a pecan pie. And I tell you, this pecan pie, if you did a blind taste test on it, I'm not sure you could really tell the difference between this and what you would buy at a store. It was that good, and again, because of the items that were used to create it with, it doesn't cause a blood sugar issue.
John, wouldn't you say that a pecan pie is pretty much sugar with a sprinkling of pecans on the top? Isn't that really what it is?
That's pretty much, when you're looking at a store-bought pecan pie, it's probably made with a bunch of corn syrup, which is GMO, a lot of fructose, really bad for you. This one was based off this syrup, Fiber Yum, Fiber are a couple of the ones in that category, along with an alcohol-based sugar that has little or no calories. And I tell you, the taste was just outstanding.
John, you mentioned 7 to 10 cups of vegetables per day. I've got to tell you that I don't know very many people who eat 7 to 10 cups of vegetables per day. Typically, an employee might run out to McDonald's for a burger. There's no vegetables in sight, right?
Yeah.
We'll be right back. Captain John Regan's with the financial state of the Union.com. The financial state of the Union.com. Please click on the news tab and you'll see the link that we're talking about for these lab tests if you choose to pursue learning more about them. Captain John, I've got a question for you. 7 to 10 cups of vegetables per day. What are you eating, and what do you recommend that we all eat? Not as a doctor, but just as a researcher and someone who's interested in improving his family's health.
Well, it's a personal choice, and I'll also say there's a lot of keto recipes out there, so you really don't have to go without, but you do have to do things like create your own ketchup and barbecue sauce and things like that, because these condiments have a lot of hidden sugars in them. I enjoy the spring mix variety of greens in it. I'll add in things like broccoli and cauliflower and a small number of carrots. Carrots do have more sugar in them, but because of the fiber, they're not so bad. Just as long, don't pig out on carrots. There's other veggies out there. It's a lot based on personal taste, but all these green leafy vegetables, especially the darker ones, not the iceberg lettuce, have pretty good nutrition. And like I say, when you start eating that amount, the 7 to 10 cups, then you're getting more of your potassium, which most people are deficient in. So it's an adjustment, and I probably wouldn't try to do that all at once. Work your way into it, because a good chance your body is not used to digesting this either.
Okay. And, John, I was looking at the ketogenic diet and what they recommend that you eat and not eat. Do you want to go through that, or do you just want me to say what you should not eat?
Like I say, there's different versions out there, but basically you're cutting out the carbs, so you're not having the sugars, you're not having the breads, the starches, the potatoes, things of that nature are really no-nos. And even once you get yourself straightened out, you really need to limit those things. You want to have good meat, preferably the grass-fed, not the corn-fed stuff, and ideally, try to go more into fish, which you need to go into the smaller fish that don't have mercury problems, and stay away from hydrogenated oil, like we've talked about. You want much in the omega-3. You got the omega-9s with olive oil. You've got the medium chain type fats from coconut oil. So those things are good. The vegetable oils, omega-6, we get too much of those, and those cause inflammation, so they're not great for you.
Okay, so what you're saying is the reason for eating smaller fish is because they're lower on the food chain, because the larger fish eat the smaller fish all the way down to the smallest fish, right? And what happens is you're increasing the toxicity levels in the larger fish who have eaten the smaller fish. Is that right?
That's how it works.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And, And when you make your salad dressing, how long will it keep? I guess you put it in a bottle and you shake it up, and do you put it in the refrigerator once you've made it?
I don't put it in the refrigerator because the oil will start to solidify a little bit.
Right.
But, we just keep olive oil and apple cider vinegar in the pantry, which is mostly what it is. And I'm just adding a few spices to it, onion powder, garlic powder, a seasonal, some salt. So really, for the amount of time that it's out, it's good.
That's the same exact recipe that my grandmother used back in the 1950s. Exactly the same. And she was pretty darn healthy, and so was my grandfather and my mom. Captain John Regan, it's been wonderful being on the air with you. Thank you so much for joining us. I look forward to more broadcasts with you. You're such a wealth of information. I'm glad you're on the path to recovery. Give my best to Becky. And I look forward to seeing you soon. Thank you so much again, Captain John Regan.
Thank you.